Hello, everyone, and happy Friday. Hope you're all doing quite well. I hope you are. Anyway, so today we have a class on something we discussed. It has to do with the luminescence, or the lights over Phoenix, that happened in 1997. So we have done classes like this before when it comes to, is there life on other planets? Is there intelligent life on other planets? My answer is yes, there has to be, only because this is a vast solar system. But are they little green men that come down to Earth in spaceships, or different forms of, extraterrestrials? Like that, I don't know. I don't know exactly what it would be that it would look like. But, there have been some, and again, I am a skeptic, because there are many people who don't believe in that there's, not that there's not life on other planets, but that there are beings that are flying around and coming into our airspace, and there's a secret, discussion or battle even going on between the government, the governments of the world, and alien life or extraterrestrial life. That I don't know. I don't think there's enough evidence from anything to really definitively say one way or the other. But that's why this is interesting, because I figure it's better to educate the public. There's a movie called Fire in the Sky. It's about a man who was abducted by aliens, so he says, and went missing for a long time and then was returned to Earth, according to him. Now, the first time, and a bunch of people saw this happen in his work crew, and they're like, oh, one moment. Oh, sorry. I find it funny that suddenly the alarm starts going off for, the weekly test. But there was a guy, and he was taking his work crews, all saw it, and they all said, hey, we saw what happened. They reported it. The locals there were like, yeah, that didn't really happen. But then he came back, and he told them what he saw. And the first time they gave them all lie detectors. Now, all of them passed the lie detectors except for one guy, and he didn't fail. They just said it was inconclusive because he was just kind of all over the place. Later on, they took the test again with all of them, and all of them passed and said what they saw was real. Now, you can beat a lie detector, but when it's a group of people, if somebody's really telling a lie, it's, between a group of, I think it was like 6 guys, one of them would have ended up lying or not telling the story the way it was, but they all told the exact same story. So again, I think my job is not to so much be skeptical. I mean, it is my job for myself to be skeptical, but I also like to give out information so that people can decide on their own. So this is a you decide for you class. What happened with the luminescence over Phoenix? So let's go over what happened. And again, this is totally up to you. The Phoenix lights, sometimes called the lights over Phoenix, were a series of widely sighted, unidentified flying objects in the skies over the southern states of Arizona and Nevada on, coming up soon, March 13th, 1997. Well, if we live closer, maybe we could go hang out and see if we see anything weird, but it's kind of a long drive. Lights of varying descriptions were seen by thousands of people between 7:30 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. So that's 3 hours of seeing this. In a space of about 300 miles or 480 kilometers, not that we're on the metric system yet, which we should be, from the Nevada line through Phoenix to the edge of Tucson. Some witnesses described seeing what appeared to be a huge carpenter's square, and it's a triangle, and they call it a carpenter's square because you can't make squares and everything out of it, but it's really, I mean, pretty much everyone who does anything with woodwork or things like that will have a carpenter's square in their garage. I know I have one. I don't do woodwork, but they're good for many things, actually. But they saw a huge Carpenter Square shaped UFO containing 5 spherical lights. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so it's like this. So there's one brightest one at the top, 2, 3, and then 4, 5. There were 2 distinct events involved in the incident: a triangular formation of lights seen to pass over the state, and a series of stationary lights seen in the Phoenix area. Both sightings were due to aircraft participating in Operation Snowbird, a plot training program for the Air National Guard based in Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona. The group of lights were later identified as a formation of an A-10 Warhog aircraft flying over Phoenix while returning to the Davis-Monthan Air Base. The second groups of lights were identified as flares dropped by another flight of A-10 aircraft that were training exercises at the Barry Goldwater Range in southwest Arizona. So, yeah. And Fief Symington, the governor of Arizona at the time, years later, recounted witnessing the incident, describing it as otherworldly. Reports of similar lights in 2007 and 2008 and were attributed to many flares dropped by fighter aircraft at Luke Air Force Base and flares attached to helium balloons released by civilian, respectively. Okay. So that's what they say. They say that it was a demonstration called Operation Snowbird that was going on in the sky. But here's the thing. So what they did, but usually they don't do these tests at night, because really, how effective are the tests? But that's what they said. They said, hey, yeah, we did a surprise one. We knew it wasn't dangerous to civilians. But I watched this thing on it. So a lot of people were like, thousands of people were like, no, it just hovered there. Like, usually you see, like, when they drop flares from planes, there's little bits of smoke that flit off into the air. Nobody saw any of that. They just saw lights sitting there. And then so the Air Force Base was like, okay, well, we're going to redo exactly what we did to appease the public, because thousands of people saw this. And so we're going to do this to appease the public. And they went out like days later and did another similar thing. And everybody was like, that didn't look anything like what we saw at all. So a lot of people were like, this is a cover-up. They're just not telling us what really happened. Because it didn't. Like, the flares fell and they fell. They're like, this stayed up there for like an hour in the same spot. Flares fall and they burn out because they're fire. There's no way it would just linger there for an hour. So people are still like, yeah, no, it was something else. It's either something you all did that you're not telling us about, or it's something, as the governor at the time described, as otherworldly. So the reports on the date that it happened, March 13, 1997, at 7:55 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, a witness in Henderson, Nevada, reported seeing a large V-shaped object traveling southeast at 8:15 p.m. An unidentified police officer, and I heard this part too, in Arizona reported seeing a cluster of reddish-orange lights disappear over the southern horizon. Shortly afterwards, there were reports of lights seen over the Prescott Valley in Arizona. Tim Lay, his wife Bobby, his son Hal, and his grandson Damian Turnage first saw the lights when they were about 65 miles away from them. At first, the lights appeared to them as 5 separate lights and distinct lights in an arc shape, as if they were on top of a balloon. But they soon realized that the lights appeared to be moving towards them. Over the next 10 or so minutes, the lights appeared to come closer. The distance between the lights increased, and they took on the shape of an upside-down V. Eventually, the lights appeared to be a couple of miles away. The family said they could make out what looked like a 60-degree Carpenter Square, with the 5 lights set into it, with one in the front and two on each side. Soon the object with the embedded lights appeared to be moving toward them, about 100 to 150 feet above them, traveling so slowly that they gave the appearance of a silent, hovering object which seemed to pass over their heads and went through a V opening in the peaks of the mountain towards the range. So here you go. See something moving slow, well, kind of like this, moving slow, and then it kind of jets through and goes through the peaks of some mountains. And they said it's 100 feet, which isn't that. I mean, if you look at me, I'm 6 feet tall. So if you go 6 into 100, that's 1. So it'd take like 40 of me, and I'm right there. That's only 40 of me standing on my shoulders or my head and going up. I mean, that's not too hard to see at all. It's far less than like an airplane in the sky. It's much closer. I mean, like I said, I'm not arguing for either side. And then, let's see, And then over Peak Mountain, Pistewa Peak Mountain, and towards the direction of Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport between 8:30 and 8:45 p.m. in Glendale, a suburb northwest of Phoenix, saw the light formation pass overhead at an altitude high enough to become obscured by thin clouds. Amateur astronomer Mitch Stanley, in Scottsdale, Arizona, also observed the high-altitude lights flying in formation through a telescope. According to Stanley, there were quite clearly individual airplanes. Okay, so he's saying he saw two different things. There you go, bringing both sides together. So approximately 10 p.m. that same evening, a large number of people in the Phoenix area reported seeing a row of brilliant lights hovering in the sky, or slowly falling. A number of photographs and videos were taken, prompting author Robert Schaefer to describe it as perhaps the most widely witnessed UFO event in human history, or in UFO history. But then again, I mean, there's lots of stories back in ancient Egypt where, there were a lot of people believes Egyptians were actually partially aliens. I mean, that's just theories. Again, people come up with crazy stuff, though. But that's why it's important to weed out the truth from I want to have seen it, and so I'm going to say I saw it, even though I might be lying and I'm not sure. So those are the reports about it. Now, there are explanations. So let's go over the explanations. What did people really see? Or what are some explanations that could possibly... Because the first thing we do in science, in anything, especially science, is to falsify any claim. And that's how you come up with a valid scientific method, is you try to falsify it. Which, say you have a theory and you're like, hey, this really works. Like, say, Newton with gravity. It's like, well, I'm going to test this theory, but I'm going to try to falsify it. I want to prove my own theory wrong. And when I can't prove it wrong, that means I have a pretty solid theory. Newtonian physics, same thing. And it lasted forever because everybody tried to prove it wrong. When it comes to astronomy, a lot of people are like, oh, is this a planet? Is it not? But it finally proved that everything does revolve around the sun, that it's not a flat earth, that it's a sphere. There's so many things, but again, these scientists try to falsify their own explanations. And though they want to be right, they're like, but I don't want to publish anything and then have somebody be like, obviously that's wrong. I did an experiment in like 5 seconds and disproved everything you just said. So they falsify and falsify and falsify until they can't falsify anymore. Then it becomes scientific and almost a scientific fact. But even Newtonian physics, after years and years of everybody just accepting it, turned out it could be falsified in some areas. So, what are some explanations in order to see? So, according to Schaefer, what became known as the Phoenix Lights incident of 1997 consists of two unrelated incidents, although both were the result of activities of the same organization, Operation Snowbird. a pilot training program operated in the winter by the Air National Guard out of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona. We went over that. Tucson astronomer and retired Air Force pilot James McGaha said he also investigated the two separate sightings and traced them both to an A-10 Warthog aircraft flying formation at high altitude. That is explanation one. The first incident, often perceived as a flying triangle by witnesses, began at approximately 8 p.m. and was due to the A-10 jets from Operation Snowbird following the assigned air traffic corridor and flying under visual flight rules. The FAA, or Federal Aviation Administration, rules concerning private and commercial aircraft do not apply to military aircraft. So the A-10 formation displayed steady formation lights rather than blinking collision lights. The formation flew over Phoenix and onto Tucson, landing at the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base around 8:45. Now, that's the first incident. The second incident, described as a row of brilliant lights hovering in the sky, or slowly falling, began at approximately 10 p.m. and was due to a flare drop exercise by different A-10 jets from the Maryland Air National Guard, also operating out of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. As part of the Operation Snowbird, so that's what happened with that. The U.S. Air Force explained the exercise as utilizing slow-falling log burning. One moment, please. Sorry, I didn't mean for you to say that. I had a little something caught my throat. Anyway. So again, it was long burning LUU 2B/B illumination flares dropped by a flight of 4 A-10 aircraft on a training exercise at the Barry M. Goldwater Air Force Range in Western County, Arizona. The flares would have been visible in Phoenix and appeared to hover due to the rising heat from the burning flares, creating a balloon effect on their parachutes, which slowed the descent. The 10 lights appeared to wink out as they fell behind the Sierra Estrella mountain range to the southwest of Phoenix. A Maryland A&G pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Ed Jones, Lieutenant Colonel, cool, Lieutenant Colonel Ed Jones, responded to a March 2007 media query, confirmed that he had flown one of the aircraft in the formation that dropped flares on the night in question. The squadron to which he belonged was at the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base on a training exercise at the time, and flew training sorties to the Goldwater Air Force Range on the night in question, according to the Maryland A&G. A history of Maryland A&G published in 2000 asserted that the squadron, the 10th Fighter Squadron, was responsible for the incident. The reports that members of the Maryland A&G were responsible for the incident were published in the Arizona Republic in July of 1997, so a few months after. Later comparisons with known military flare drops were reported on local television stations, showing similarities between the known military flare drops and the Phoenix lights. An analysis of the luminosity of LUU 2BB illumination flares, the type which would have been used by A-10 aircraft at the time, determined that the luminosity of such flares of approximately 50 to 70 miles would fall well within the range of the lights viewed from Phoenix. So the governor's response eventually was shortly after the incident. He held the press conference joking that they found who was responsible and revealing an aide dressed in an alien costume. Later in 2007, Symington reportedly told UFO investigator that he had a personal close encounter with an alien spacecraft, but remained silent because he didn't want to panic the populace. According to Symington, I'm a pilot and I just know every machine that flies. It was bigger than anything I've ever seen. It remains a great mystery. Other people saw it, and they were responsible people. I don't know why people would ridicule it. So, there you go. So those are the facts of the situation. A lot of people saw it. A lot of people said, and there were a lot of pilots who even said, and police officers who said this was not just an ordinary incident. There was a lot more to this than not. So, again, it's up to you. You decide for you. What do you think it is? It could be aircraft. And it could have just happened differently that night. A lot of times things happen like that, where it's like, oh, yeah, we can't believe it happened like this, but it did. I mean, I've seen weird things in my life, and it doesn't mean that it was alien, but this is thousands of people seeing it. So, what do you think? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the class, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Please let me know if you come up with any theories, or if you have suggestions for future Friday classes. All right. Ciao for now, everybody.